Podcasting since 2005. This is the King of Podcasts radio network. kingofpodcasts.com.
Some sugar babies take that tragic trip down through trauma to toxic relationships to something transactional.
We're all a little depraved and debaucherous. Here is the King of Podcasts.
Welcome to the program. This is Depraved and Debaucherous, and I am King of Podcasts here with you. I appreciate all of you joining me here on the program and listen to the show on a regular basis. I really, however you found this show, whether it's me talking about Bonnie Blue, Andrew Tate, and all these other crazy people in the world of depravity and debauchery, thank you for finding the show. I mean it. It means a lot to me that this little show could get out to so many people, especially a lot of young people that I see. When I look at the numbers and how this show's performing, I'm very pleasantly happy and surprised and thrilled that some of you have really caught on to this show and have been listening to it. So thank you for that. I really mean that from the bottom of my heart. It means a lot to me. So we're going to go back to several weeks ago. There was an episode that I did called Sugar Daddies, Sugar Babies, and the New Normal of Profit-Based Dating. So this was 2 weeks ago on the program that I talked about a young lady named Margot Graff, and I talked about how at 33 years old, she is an actress, model, entrepreneur, self-proclaimed queen of receiving, and she's receiving between $16,000 and $17,000 a month in allowances and lavish gifts among a boyfriend and several sugar daddies. So I went into the story explaining the point about the trauma that there are a number, and of course, we can't put a number on that. So how many sugar babies are out there that are in these sugar relationships that come from a significant traumatic background, that have gone through a considerable amount of sexual trauma, where trauma bonding comes in, and sugar relationships can be tied into trauma bonding. That is a thing too. So I want to bring all that together and make the point. So there are several things to get into and explain what happens here. So I'm going to go back to her story and play back as an example of what we're going to talk about tonight. So sugar relationships. First of all, the interest into sugar relationships. There was a recent study that came out from Hungary that had 312 participants. They were looking at the psychological factors that influence people's openness to sugar relationships, and that the attitudes aren't random, but are shaped by deep-rooted psychological strategies to develop in response to early life experiences. And part of that can be, that I've talked about plenty of times in this program, is where it comes from with a young woman that decides to be a sugar baby, and what her background comes from if she had a fatherly figure. Maybe not a father, but someone that was a dominant figure that could serve as a role model for her to follow in the footsteps of finding someone that is like that fatherly figure, that shared love, security, safety, and was just there for them. Like it was just a wall of safety and security and love that is really, that's the attachment of a father to their daughter and their love for each other and how they are with each other, with the mom also in play. So one of the study's most significant findings is that openness in sugar relationships is primarily linked to what researchers call short-term mating orientation, referring to a psychological tendency to be comfortable with casual sexual relationships, to seek variety in romantic partners rather than focusing on long-term commitment. Because of the trauma they might have come through to get to this point, that's why they did not want to go and stay into any commitment, which means take away any possibility of them finding a long-term relationship that can lead to marriage very early on in life, maybe children, maybe a happy family, all that. Throw that away because it's not going to be possible if this is the plan of a woman decides to go into this route and find someone short-term, friends with benefits, or just whatever. So people with a short-term mating orientation tend to be more open to casual sex, are comfortable with multiple partners, open relationships, and don't necessarily view sex as requiring emotional attachment or long-term commitment. And this psychological orientation appears to be the strongest predictor of attitudes towards sugar relationships. that these arrangements appeal to individuals who are already comfortable with less traditional relationship structures. What you got to think about is how broken down in the normal course of events that a woman goes through, where she decides she's happy to be in casual sex with somebody, have multiple partners, and doesn't get emotional or feel attached to anybody during sex. Some do, but they're saying they're not from the initial onset. So the research community has been debating about whether sugar relationships should be considered short-term or long-term mating strategies, but the evidence strongly suggests they align more closely with short-term approaches to relationships. But now here's the thing too. There are men out there, the toxicity that they bring because of whatever traumatic events that they might have brought these two together. Because the interest for the man with that woman, based on if they didn't have a motherly figure to fall back on, to have someone that'll nurture them, love them, and give them the appreciation and the care that they're looking for. If they can't know what that's like or have had any experience in their own relationships with anybody sexually, then they have their own issues with emotional attachment or long-term commitment. Because then there's the case where the mother is not completely attached to the child, to the son, and there's an emotional attachment, detachment there. I think the John Bowlby kind of studies, right? Anxious attachment strategies. These things that go on. And then there are men, if they do not have that nurturing aspect from the mother, nor do they have that sexual experience from a young age, in their teens, 20s, and so on, and they're not familiar, then they go into the real world not knowing. They'll go into a structure where they'll go into a short-term mating standpoint because that's where they are. They'll go with short-term mating strategies because they're just trying to find their way. I can tell you that, first of all, I can put my hand up and say that I have been into short-term mating strategies because from my end, I've just been trying to find my way just to get past a couple of dates because I have never experienced in my years what a long-term relationship is like. Never happened. That's the reason I talk about this right here, because I have experienced that. So from the man's standpoint, I can speak about it and I can pass this along to other men out there. Hopefully they'll understand what I'm saying here, and they'll find a way to go ahead and work on their own selves to understand, confront what they're dealing with, find the trauma that's dealing with them. It might not be something that's overly tragic, but like there's a trauma inside of you. You need to be able to go and address it, accept it, and confront it. Acceptance and confrontations, ACT. It is helpful. And it took me a long time to get to that point. I want other men out there, if you're feeling the same way, that's something that's got to be done too. But the thing is too, is that where they talk about there are people that want to have, that feel comfortable with multiple partners or not looking at sex as requiring emotional attachment or long-term commitment. But part of it is that if you're going to be in a short-term mating strategy, if you're going to go into somebody that's a friends with benefits or whatever it is, yes, you cannot let your heart get caught up in this. But then the people that are broken from all this, emotionally broken, we know that on both sides, men and women will go ahead and abuse if someone is vulnerable because of what they've gone through. And for most women, they're not the ones that are necessarily overly narcissistic or controlling or manipulative. They are. Don't get me wrong. They can be. And men can be the same way. But then at the same time, women can find the outlet to go ahead and be in a sugar relationship to get what they want from it. Because that's where they feel like of the trauma they've gone through. Because of the toxic relationships they've gone through as well, they feel like, well, it's their beauty and their presence and who they are. That's enough for someone to go ahead and support them and give them what they want. So let's go back to Margot Graf's interviews we talked about 2 weeks ago on the program about the new normal of profit-based dating. So I'm going to go and play back the interview she did with Nicole Walters on Dear Media. Let's go back to that and play a little clip from that.
Or fat, or like, because I wasn't looking for love.
Wait, so this is a kink thing
for sure.
So
and
you
people
kind
with
of
a lot of money, also like people with a lot of money, they are desensitized to the normal. they like to feel, they need to feel something.
Okay, so let's get right into what it is. So you find someone, you get them.
Yeah.
What is
well, let's move along here. There's also an OnlyFans comparison that show also makes in this podcast.
You know, because it's not blowing my mind. I know some people listening right now.
There's a difference between like this and OnlyFans, right? Like,
yeah, so walk me through, right? Because it's normalized, right? There are Instagram girls who literally post pictures of themselves
After
for money.
I got my body done, I was in a relationship.
What have you had done? Like, what do people need to get done?
I got my boobs and lipo done during the pandemic when like I had all the time in the world to heal, which was great. And it went from like, I mean, I built my body so that if you saw me naked on screen in a movie, you would never know that I had my body done. I wanted everything like so naturally, classy, elegant, tasteful.
And timeless, right? Like it can stay like that forever. You're not going to like change. Yeah.
100%. And he said he was unattracted to me. And I'm like, bro, I look the best I've ever looked in my life, dog.
It's so good that you
I never
know
had
this about
titties
yourself.
like this. So I got on OnlyFans and I was just doing lingerie and swim because I was in this swim pageant. We did 38 swimsuit look photo shoots on this pageant. I was like, I can just sell my hot photos. I don't need to do anything nude or inappropriate. And I made great money. I only did it for like 6 months, but people kept asking for customs and I just...
Wow. Yeah. So remember, the mindset for her, bad relationship, among other things we talked about, if you need to go back to 2 weeks ago and catch that episode, because I gave the whole story. I gave you almost an hour of Margot's story, starting with what she's doing as a sugar baby for the sugar daddies and where she has her mind set now. And then going back to what she said on a previous podcast when she talked about her trauma, which never got discussed on the newer podcast. And I had to go ahead and connect those two together because I thought her story, it was important for people to go ahead and hear all of that together. Now, back to the story here. It goes into her being an example of what we're talking about when it comes to the research. Because she didn't necessarily heal from the trauma. Her way of healing from the trauma was enhancements, of changing herself, because she didn't want to be the girl from Minnesota anymore. She cannot be her. Now, that's not saying that women can't go ahead and evolve and change. But when you lose your innocence, you lose who you are. Like who you were when you grew up, then you kind of lose who your identity was. I mean, you grow into a new identity, but like there should be a part of you that still stays intact. I mean, it's not supposed to be like some childlike quality, but like there's something about who you are from growing up and holding on to who you are. And that's the part I think that's very important about this. Now, in the research that I'm talking about here for this story from Observer Voice about why people are open to sugar relationships and the psychological meanings behind it, they go on to talk about that perhaps the most intriguing finding was the connection between childhood experiences and adult relationship attitudes. Researchers discovered an indirect pathway linking childhood resource scarcity to openness to sugar relationships, particularly among women. Childhood resource scarcity. Now, women who experienced limited family resources during childhood were more likely to develop fast life history strategies, which in turn predicted greater openness to sugar relationships in adulthood. So, coming from tough times. And in those tough times, there could be dysfunction. There could be a broken home. Like there's nothing that's being said about why there is that financial issue. But childhood resource scarcity, that's got to be something to be said. And think about those that are, that come from communities that are just, all the children are resource scarce. Think about it like that. That's why you have women are out there that are not able to go ahead and be in a healthy relationship because they're not healthy themselves emotionally. Women who experience these limited family resources were more likely to develop fast life history strategies, as we said, and that the early experiences of resource scarcity might create a lasting psychological orientation towards securing resources for relationships. Yeah, I never have enough of anything, and I don't want to live poor anymore. I can't go back to that life. That's the kind of idea. The pathway makes evolutionary sense, they say. That women have always faced greater reproductive costs and risks, and making resource security particularly important for survival and successful child rearing. That's back in the day, but a much different story now. So the pattern is specific to women, and researchers couldn't find this among men. So women always feel like they need to go ahead and hold on to getting a better life. If they didn't have that life, they want to make a better life for themselves. Or what's always what we hear from women when they have a child? I want to give my child everything I'd ever had. We always hear that, right? That's also just families together always say that. And what does it mean for understanding modern relationships? Well, rather than viewing sugar relationships as purely exploitative or unusual arrangements, research suggests they may represent adaptive responses to specific developmental experiences and psychological orientations. Right. So don't play this up that every sugar daddy, sugar baby relationship is just some quirky thing that's just all money based. No, there are deep, intrinsic, emotional, psychological reasons for this. That's what they're saying. Now, this study doesn't judge relationships as positive or negative, but they're looking at why some people are drawn to them while others are not. They want to help to keep this perspective to reduce stigma and promote more nuanced discussions on this about relationship diversity in modern society. So they move along and say that they talked to Hungarian university students. So you got to go by what background they might have had, where they came from. And in the conclusion, they say that by connecting childhood experiences to adult relationship strategies through evolutionary psychology, it helps explain why some individuals are drawn to sugar relationships while others are not. And that openness to sugar relationships among women may represent an adaptive response to early resource scarcity. The perspective neither condemns nor endorses these relationships, but provides a scientific framework for understanding psychological origins. So I'm here to go ahead and talk about the psychological origins based on Margot's story and based on other things we're learning about this. Modern relationship behaviors, in general, however novel they may appear, are deep-rooted in psychological processes shaped by both evolutionary history and individual developmental experiences. So now let's go into this here. This is by Sage Publications, put that out in a journal that they had on this. And yeah, take a look at it. Again, observervoice.com put the story out about there, titled Why Some People Are Open to Sugar Relationships, the Psychology Behind Modern Dating Choices. So Psychology Today talks about this. Same thing goes. The research was done in evolutionary psychology. So more of this Hungarian story. They looked at the life history strategy, a concept referring to whether someone tends to favor long-term investment versus immediate reward. Now, we know that men and women kind of fall on that same trait. Men will probably look for trying to do things to create long-term investment. And that's what they do when it comes to finding a woman, when it comes to their careers, when it comes to all this. Like the alpha male, that's all it is, long-term investment. Versus immediate reward. Childhood experiences were measured using the family resources scale, assessing perceived adequacy of material and emotional support during childhood, and the child unpredictability scale, which gauges how chaotic or unstable participants' early environments are. They're going in the right route here. Then they also use a scale called perceived vulnerability to disease, whether concern about infection might relate to openness to transactional relationships. But look at what they're talking about right here. When they're looking at trying to understand why someone would be susceptible and open to sugar relationships, it has to do with what their background was. If it's scarcity, if it's being poor, if it's being destitute, if it's not, where obviously love is not enough. Money is everything. Or that there was a lack of material and emotional support during childhood. By the way, material and emotional support, because if they were not taken care of, looked after, protected, these young women, if they were assaulted, if they were victims of trauma that caused trauma, that has never been addressed, honestly, going back to the childhood. Because I always think that, at least for myself, you have to find a piece of yourself from your childhood before things happen to you, to be able to go ahead and bring yourself full circle to healing yourself from your trauma. I believe that wholeheartedly. That's where I look at it for myself. Back to Margot. And like I said, the story that she came from and what she went through is quite expansive. This is from another podcast that she was on. And it's her where in this part of the conversation, she talks about that She was subjected to softcore porn at a young age. So there were some issues at home. Emotional material support kind of off there in Minnesota where she was. And then again, a move to California. This is after where the thing was, he was in Minnesota. She was a business major and she was trying to work her way through. But at the time she was in a sorority house, had a boy that was there that was always kind of taking care of things, kind of a handyman around the house. She got into a relationship with him. And this boy was extremely abusive to her, narcissistic, controlling, manipulative, all the nine. And then she decided to go ahead and escape overseas for some international studies towards her degree. So she goes to Europe, and this is where her story comes in from there.
So when I was studying abroad in Europe, I was just numbing the pain away. I was partying. I was doing everything to, just try and heal myself, but I was really numbing myself because you're in college, right? So you're like, I'll just go party all over Europe. I'll do whatever. And when you're looking for the party will always find you. Yeah. The party will always find you. And especially if you're, a privileged white girl who's also had a very privileged life, you weren't given any, self-defense class. You weren't told to be aware that you're actually a target. You weren't told that, hey, when you're always looking for the party and you're always going with the party and you're into, the nice things in life, people will actually use that to bait you.
Well, and you're again, material and emotional support that she did not have. And then her approach at 18, 19, 20 years old to heal from her emotional trauma that she was leaving behind, completely extricate herself from the situation, get her away from Minnesota, small town Minnesota, to Europe. Complete culture shock. Party, all of that. And again, she sees that, what she's getting herself into, she is not prepared for. And it's not the right place for her to find herself in the right mind. Like, it's the idea of recovering. I think, well, if you just go somewhere else, it's all going to go away. Well, no, unfortunately, the pattern of abuse that she went through comes back to find you. And that's what happened here. So more of her story. Let's get to more of what she actually said.
Guard was down because you went to the other side of the world to feel safe. So all of a sudden you think you're in a safe space.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So that's where I actually met these guys I was in Brussels, Belgium, and they were like, hey, we're a band. Do you want to go on tour with us? And I was like, real life Penny Lane from Almost Famous? Yeah, I want to be a Band-Aid. My cousins are like, we're close to being... Excuse me. So I hate swearing, but I do it a lot. We're close to being billionaires, had private jets. I was like, my dad works with rock stars. I was like, this is my life. This is what I'm meant to do. Take me away from this hellhole that is my life. Put me on a private jet and let's start the movie that is my life. And God was like, oh yeah, this is going to be a movie for sure. But they ended up being, so they would speak to me in a French-American accent. So they were speaking American in a French accent. And then I guess... So they were like, hey, ask me all these questions. Do you have a passport, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, and they were going to take me on tour with them on their jet. And I was like, yeah, my dad would totally understand if I just left for a little bit, went on tour, and I would come back. Like, life of a rock star is, I'm down. I guess they had roofied me. And by the time I blacked back in, I was like, something is very wrong. I do not feel safe. I have to get out of here. I don't know what's going on. There's cops. I have to leave. So I grabbed my friend and I was like, we have to go now.
And you guys were where at this time?
In Brussels, Belgium.
But I mean, like at a festival, at a bar?
No, we were at a bar, a brewery, Pink Elephant or something like. It was like a pink elephant, I think is their logo.
Was there a lot of people there?
Delirium. Yes and no. I don't really remember. It was a little foggy.
Sure.
So again, I mean, not prepared. It's like there was like the nurturing, the mentorship, helping to raise this young girl to grow up so that she could be prepared for what the real life was going to bring to her. So naivete comes into play, which that never goes away and just kind of stays in the play because she thought she was in a safe place. She said it. Thought I was in a safe place all the way from all this. But again, that abusive pattern, that pattern of abuse, it follows you. I don't know why it is, but it's like kismet. It's for some people, they just think, oh, if I just go and just try to push it deep down inside of me, block it off, block it away, just ignore it, neglect it, that things will just get better. It never does. A pattern. And this pattern followed her all the way to Europe, to Brussels, Belgium, for her to go and get into this thing. And remember, yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate. I wish she would have known better, and maybe her friends as well wouldn't have got caught up in this idea of thinking this band was supposedly going to go ahead and like take them out and have a great time, when they completely lied to her and had a completely different ulterior motive. And look at the probably sex trafficker, which is what probably the plan was going to be. And who knows if her parents or anybody else would ever hear from her again. All this right here says everything you need to know about why she decided to go into a sugar relationship. Astounding, but it's true. And that's unfortunate. Now, the appeal, the risks of sugar daddy relationships, we go into another study that came out. And a study from Psychology Today actually talks about this, that says that over 3 million college students in the U.S. are considered so-called sugar babies. Let me give you that number again. This is why I talk about this so much. 3 million college students in the United States are considered so-called sugar babies. That should shock you. These are women that are not just on Seeking or some other sugar daddy website. These are just out there in general. We don't know to the extent of what they're doing, but they're in transactional relationships. And that's just counting the ones that we'll say are so-called sugar babies. Because we're not even talking about the women that are out there now. You see on TikTok, you see on Instagram, you see wherever. Or you just see in person that maybe they're not necessarily as drawn into a sugar relationship per se, but the relationship they're trying to be in is transactional. Not too much farther away from being a sugar baby. And that's also not counting those OnlyFans models or those that are online showing off their bodies, that if they did find someone to be with, they would be doing the same thing. They will be looking for something transactional. Now, a study in the Trauma and Mental Health Report, an interview that they did in this particular study, that was a young lady that they called Emily, a 21-year-old university student. She needed extra income. She describes one among several of her experiences with a sugar daddy who was married, but again, not uncommon when that happens. And he had a wife and kids that did not know, so she felt a little weird about it. She says that being in this relationship with a sugar daddy was all risky. Quote, I'm lucky that nothing bad ever did happen. If any of them had ever had bad intentions, they could have easily done anything to me. There's a lot of things that could go wrong. You could get ripped off. It's risky. You have to be careful. And there's really no way of knowing. You talk to someone and they seem super nice, and then they end up not being genuine. So she stopped and said that the impact the experience had on her self-esteem was, quote, there were definitely times that I didn't feel really good about myself afterwards. I would try to think about this in this way. They're paying me for my time, not for what I am doing. But there were times that I would feel kind of used. Sometimes you do things you don't really want to do just for the money, and regret is definitely a part of it. You also lose some autonomy. If you aren't paying for your own stuff anymore, it kind of feels like your life isn't yours. But then there's that part where women will try to say, well, they want to go ahead and be able to say that, well, I have my own income, and then I just get it from somebody else. Discretionary income, whatever it might be. So there's women that will try to go and turn this around and say, well, no, I have my money, I have my life, I can do what I want. But then they will want money from somewhere else. They don't want to spend their own money. They'd rather spend somebody else's money. So this young girl right here, yeah, she was doing things where she was on the clock and she was basically at the behest of this sugar daddy, and she didn't feel like she was being herself. They talked to a marriage and family therapist, Jessica Stebbins, who counsels women who have a history of prostitution. And she talked about this sugar baby trend, saying, quote, the fact is that many young women get into these relationships for the same reasons that prostitutes enter their profession. In these cases, the risks are very similar to prostitution, and it is safe to say that neither the prostitute nor the sugar baby will come out of the experience free of emotional scars. But the point is, Jessica, that we already know that most of these women, not all, but most, already come in with emotional scars already. All they're doing is intensifying. These girls express the same emotions and problems as the girls who were labeled prostitutes did. Shame, guilt, embarrassment, feeling exposed, vulnerable, dirty, anxious, and depressed. He thinks that the trouble with sugar relationships is that they do not allow for feelings to develop naturally, but rather on the promise of money. And it can affect morale and self-view and lead to other negative consequences. Now, on the other end, one other person I talked to named Jordan says that was very empowering. Quote, in the end, as long as there is full communication and consent throughout the entire process, there's nothing wrong with doing what you can to support yourself. To be able to meet with individuals, create a mutual agreement, and have a very good time, it's a very positive experience and empowering at best. It shows sugar babies that they have the drive and motivation to help themselves or even just to live happily. And there are those women that will say, well, this is to help, advance my income because right now, tough times, growing up, getting into college or trying to start off in a career, whatever it might be, that they might do things where if they have their beauty, they have their youth, then they will use it to get what they want. Purely transactional, no emotion involved at all. But in some cases, there goes the same thing about possible resource scarcity that comes into play. But then I think also it might not be just necessarily the scarcity. It's also the fact that there might be things that in the world of social media, the age of social media that we have right now, there are so many things that women show that they have that other women want. I mean, if you look at a girl that's on TikTok or Instagram and you can see, oh, it's a beautiful woman. How many comments are for the women themselves? Oh, where did you get that outfit? Oh, you look great. Your body is tea, all that. Women that want to be like those women. So there is a jealousy or there is an admiration and what they want to be able to do to get closer to being like that. Those kind of things. Fascinating. I hope that all this makes sense to everyone out here when you think about this, because I really want it to go ahead and sink in as much as possible that while there are sugar relationships that could just be, hey, listen, I'm not going to knock any girl that wants to go and get a little bit ahead financially until they can find themselves in a way where they are financially ahead of themselves, right? And they have their career, they have their life, they have what they want. So sometimes if a woman can do that, hey, all more power to them. But I'm worried about the ones that are in this and have been vulnerable and naive and been traumatized and they never handled it. Because getting into one of these sugar relationships makes things worse. But also, guys, if you are into this kind of thing right now and you find girls that you meet from sugar relationships, I want you to take into account that maybe they come back from a good list of emotional baggage that they come up with that you don't know about. And if you try to understand them, and maybe if you try to go and help them overcome what they're going through, what they went through, and bring them out of that, find a way that you can be filling the void that they didn't have growing up. In some way, kind of like a fatherly or just a brotherly type figure. You give a little piece of that to yourself, to her, to help her overcome what she went through. If you're looking to try to create some kind of emotional attachment with her, if that's what you want. Because at this point, I mean, we're not finding a lot of girls that are willing to go ahead and go through just meeting up and, traditional relationships. We're finding them other modes. And we're finding women in various situations that they're not just like ready to date. No, they come with some emotional baggage, most likely. And you know what? More than anything else, there might be things that you might not know about them. But, we always know that, if they're crazy, they might be great in bed. Or if it's just the sex that you're looking for, and they're also looking just for the sex, well, then go along and have the sex as you want. But if you can help them a little bit, in the long run, that might be helpful. But in the meantime, if you're going to just go ahead and hook up and get together with a girl that might be in a sugar relationship with you, if you put a little investment on them, maybe you can get to be a little depraved and debaucherous.